Hello and welcome to the Fabric Spotlight, a series of talks with industry leaders in the cloud and IoT infrastructure space. Today I have a great pleasure to welcome Manoj Leelanivas, who is the Chief Product Officer at Juniper, and my old boss there. So welcome, Manoj.
Thank you, Rajan. Delighted to be here.
Wonderful. So, Manoj, I know that you've had a very interesting journey, a lot more interesting than the journey that I've been through. You have risen all the way through Juniper. The way we met is when you started the software initiative at Juniper. You did your own startup. I'd like you to talk about it, what you learned, how you got to where you did, and what are the learnings for our audience?
Wow, that's a pretty loaded question. I'm going to talk about my entire career here. So I started my career pretty early in Cisco, and started from college at Cisco. Spent about 6-7 years there. Then was part of the early team at Juniper, which created Juniper. So it was a great experience. Early startup. Getting to know how the startup culture works. It was an exciting journey. And then I was lucky enough to have a great career growth at Juniper too, to rise up to be a general manager of a business and eventually an executive vice president. So, and had the ability to not just look at products and engineering, but also even run overlay sales. So I had a good background from all of that. And one fine morning, I decided, okay, it's time to go and do a startup, which made me go and build a security startup called Cyfort. And 4 years into the journey, again, I was extremely lucky to have been acquired back to Juniper. So I'm back at Juniper as a Chief Product Officer for the last 9 months.
That's wonderful. So you made a transition from Juniper to running a startup in the security space, which is pretty hot. What experiences transcended from the experience at Juniper to building up Cyfort?
So at Juniper, I think once I grew a business to a $2 billion scale, which was the Edge business, which you may be very familiar with, I had the itch to go and create a new business. So the CEO at that time, Kevin Johnson, gave this great opportunity to look at how do you build a software business in the company. So that was part of even the acquisition of Enkina was part of that whole thesis. So it was it always had this desire to build something new, even though I was in a larger company. Kind of recreate the early days of Juniper, but in a way which is different, almost like a CEO of a small company within a large company. It had its area of growth, but it also had its challenges being in a larger company, and I really wanted to see how we can actually build a smaller business in a larger company. But then one of the understandings which I had in that exercise was that maybe I should start with a small company. Start it from scratch, a small company, build it, be, the chief bottle washer for the company, be the chief sales officer for the company, the chief fundraising officer for the company, that whole experience to see all the different parts of how you build a startup. I personally think building a startup outside or inside a company are very similar, because even inside the company, when you don't have the gravitational pull of the sales force, which is focused on the core business, it's tough to get the eyes and ears of the sales team or the rest of the company, right? So how do you do that? How do you navigate in those waters is very similar to what we do in a real startup outside, which is the experience I had at Cyfort, where you had you walk out of a company with a great brand. You think the brand and you are kind of associated with each other, and you come outside and you find out the very same customers you had lots of conversations with, they're not always available for you, right? Because you're a complete non-entity now. You're creating a new space, so you have to market yourself, market your brand, market your company, hire the right people. So it's almost like a start from scratch. It's a little bit of a street fight, and then fundraising, and then winning customers. But at the same time, the journey of a startup, which I'm sure you've done it multiple times, it's almost like a drug, right? Sometimes you see, okay, there is no light at the end of the day, but wow, when you get the first PO, or when you're able to get a large customer, customer you dream of, like Netflix, completely buy into a solution, and you get a huge PO from Netflix, there's nothing that beats that, right? So there are comparisons in a large company and a small company, but I would say the largest deal I got at my early days at Juniper didn't compare as strong as one of the smaller deals I got at the Cypher days, right? So I think that personal, connection you make, the emotional connection to the company and the team and everything is very good in a startup. And now in my third stint of the journey, what I'm trying to do is take that startup, experience and recreate the startup experience in a larger company. Now I know much more about the startup experience, so using that strength to drive a complete software transformation for the company and drive a cloud-first strategy for the company.
That's very interesting because you did try the first phase was to drive the software transformation. Now you're driving the cloud transformation in Juniper, as you mentioned. So, what is your view on the cloud infrastructure and Juniper's cloud infrastructure strategy? How are you pursuing it?
So if you look at most of the enterprise companies in the infrastructure space who have not been born in the cloud, Juniper included, I think they're facing this same sort of strategic question. What's the relevance in this new cloud-first world? So Juniper is no different. So unequivocally, I would say the world is going cloud-first. When you look at Juniper's customer base, you have service provider customers, which account for about like 45-50% of our revenue, but the rest is divided across cloud service providers as well as enterprise customers. But it doesn't matter what customer segment we are talking about, everybody's going cloud first. Let's just start with the cloud service providers. Of course, this is the bread and butter business, right? The huge infrastructure they build out, and Juniper plays a significant part in that infrastructure build out. So it's predominantly building the infrastructure for their data centers, for connecting the data centers, onboarding customers. That infrastructure is where Juniper plays. So it's an essential part of the Juniper strategy. But what I want to focus more on is the cloud-first journey for the predominant customers we have, which is service providers and enterprises. If you look at the enterprises, the small, medium enterprises have definitely gone cloud. But if you look at the larger enterprises, what I would call as the Global 2000, they're in various stages of that journey. Some of them have migrated to the cloud quickly, and some of them are actually, looking at, okay, certain workloads have a propensity to go to GCP, certain workloads to Amazon, certain workloads to, say Azure. So they're looking at a multiple cloud strategy, but then now they've gone beyond that and gone to a true multi-cloud approach, right? Because they don't want to get locked in, right? This is very similar to the ancient, 20, 25 years ago, it used to be IBM, lock in everything. 10, 15 years ago, it was Cisco locking in everything. And now, a similar sort of lock-in is coming from the public cloud too, right? So enterprises have gotten smarter that, some of the cloud movement is a little bit like Hotel California, right? Once you put your workload there, you cannot really take it out because, the tentacles of data and everything, which is like stuck there, you can't pull it out that easily. So enterprise is getting smarter. Okay, we don't want to go into the same scenario happened to us 25 years ago, 10 years ago. So they are embracing a multi-cloud strategy, and they're looking to work with companies like us and others who are enabling a multi-cloud strategy for them. So that's a big focus for us in the enterprise. Similarly, if you look at the campus and branch of the enterprise, the mantra is all about simplicity. People want, make it super simple for me. I don't want this complicated, dashboards. I don't want this complicated management of network and all that stuff. Make it simple. I have 10 millennials in my workforce. I want to make it easy for them. So that is also driving a cloud-first motion in the enterprise. People want to manage things from the cloud, whether it's your campus, your branch, your WAN. It's almost like a software-defined enterprise, which is happening in the campus and branch. So if you look at the data center side, which is going multi-cloud, if you look at the campus and branch, it's going cloud delivered. So again, cloud-first in the enterprise. And last but not the least, if you look at service providers, service providers have a strong, focus on the IP transport network, which connects the core, the edge, and aggregation networks. But they're increasingly focusing on how to monetize further. And monetization comes only in, cloud, again, because they want to build a cloud infrastructure where they can deliver new services closer to the edge. So I think that's the angle we're going. So if you look at any of these customer segments, it's all cloud first, which is why our investment is very aligned with the cloud-first strategy.
That's very interesting. We also noticed that Juniper has been also emphasizing security as a part of the cloud strategy. What is Juniper's strategy on security? How does it align with your cloud initiatives? And can you be a little bit more specific as to what are the initiatives that you're undertaking? Also, it's very interesting, you also talked about the campus with your Mist acquisition. So if you can talk about both of that. your missed acquisition as well as your security.
Absolutely. So I think if you look at our cloud strategy, say for instance on the data center, it is a enterprise multi-cloud solution where you want to provide the ability for the enterprise to not only have certain workloads which probably will remain in the enterprise, in the data center, private cloud, or the private data center for the longest period of time, as well as the ability to have workloads in any of the public clouds, and have this all managed with a common policy and a common security umbrella. So our multi-cloud solution is about packaging what we call as Contrail, which is our Contrail networking stack with the cloud stack, which is Contrail Cloud, where we package Red Hat's OpenStack as well as OpenShift along with our solution. So it's a complete package where you get compute, storage, networking, and security, all the way from the data center to any of the clouds, and you can move workloads in and out. You can have bare metal workloads, you can have container workloads, you can have virtual workloads. So on the enterprise side, it's on the OpenStack side if you want to do virtualization, but you can have bare metal or container workloads. And we completely embrace the OpenShift Kubernetes movement. So our focus is to get the traditional workloads moved to more of a container workload so that you can seamlessly move between multiple clouds. And we secure it from the data center to the multi-cloud world, again, seamlessly with a common policy. So that is our strategy. So as you might have heard, as I articulated the strategy, security came in at least 10 times. So whether it's the perimeter firewalls on your data center, or whether it's your east-west firewall, which are not just physical firewalls, but virtual firewalls to protect the virtual workloads, or the container firewalls, which actually span it all the way to the multi-cloud journey in the OpenShift world. Mm-hmm. It is security all throughout. And we're not talking about layer 1 to layer 4, but layer 4 to layer 7. And now we're looking at what are the additional aspects of security which we need to look when you're looking at cloud workloads, right? Is it going beyond just L4 to L7, or is it going into application API level? Do we need to look at service mesh? Do we need to look at security mesh security? Do we look at API level security? So those are some of the things we are looking at. But the journey is one where we strongly believe we have the complete networking stack as well as the security stack to couple with Red Hat's compute and storage to give a complete solution irrespective of what the workload is. Bare metal, virtual or container, and not have the challenges which some of the traditional solutions have in terms of an excessive tax on a certain kind of workload, or a closed solution where you cannot work with anybody else. So our solution is pretty open. We work with various different overlays and underlays, and one of the key differentiators in our solution is that we do not just the multi-cloud management from an overlay perspective, but also we do the underlay management too. So you get the complete package solution if you want. And more importantly, if you are a heterogeneous environment, you can actually plug in other people's solutions into ours. So we are just driving an open multi-cloud initiative, and security is a key aspect of how we're going to be successful there.
I guess that explains also Juniper's investment in Kavach, one of our portfolio companies. So thank you very much on that.
Kavach is a very, very good company. We are always looking at the spectrum to see, what are the companies, what are the interesting companies out there. And I think our relationship with Fabric has been great. We not only invested in Kavach, but other companies too.
Yes. Talk about investing in other Fabric companies. There is an edge strategy also that you articulated as you talked about it here. IoT is part of an edge play also, as you can see. So what is Juniper's overall edge strategy in the world of cloud and in the world of IoT, or the context of both applications and infrastructure? How do you play in the edge?
Mm-hmm. So there are two aspects. One is I already talked about say our acquisition of Mist, which is from the enterprise edge point of view, how do you make things simple? So the cloud delivered solution to make the enterprise edge simple. But the other part of edge is edge compute. I don't know if you are familiar with this. Our Contrail solution is actually the most used telco cloud solution in the world, among the top 20-25 service providers. The reason is over 5-6 years we have focused heavily on service providers, allowing them to build infrastructure using again the same Contrail cloud I mentioned earlier in the enterprise multi-cloud scenario, the same infrastructure to deliver classical services in the service provider, NFAI services, sometimes virtual IMS services. So those services which used to be traditional brick and mortar services, so as to speak, now they're all virtualized services, all managed and controlled with the Contrail Cloud today. So we have gotten great traction with service providers to do that. And now we have taken the centralized control and have distributed the actual edge compute out closer to the edge. So we have the ability to control things in a centralized fashion, but have the local compute happen in a distributed fashion. So we call it the Contrail Edge Cloud, and that is one of the things, one of the solutions service providers are looking for to deliver new services, especially with the advent of 5G. As the 5G connectivity is going to become prevalent, there is new kinds of applications coming on board, applications which will work only if there is minimal latency. Think of it as interactive, high fidelity games. Think of it as, more VR, AR kind of activity. Think of it as, all these connected car initiatives, or, some of those, people talk about remote surgery and stuff like that, but that may be a little too far-fetched at this point of time. But the stuff like interactive gaming, connected car is becoming a reality. It's possible because 5G has, increased the speeds, increased the bandwidth, and minimized the latency. So we can actually do things closer to the edge. Now, the most important thing is having all this edge compute stack as close to the edge or as close to the customer as possible. And which is why our focus is heavily on, taking the telco cloud infrastructure and making sure the edge cloud, has the same proliferation as the telco cloud infrastructure.
Fantastic. And that again weaves back. Now I can start to connect the threads together as to why you invested in IoTM as a part of this thing. So in the context of IoT, which is, I suppose, another edge application, what is your thoughts on security or even the IoT apps at the edge, or what else is driving your edge initiatives?
So I think, as I talked earlier, I think the applications are the king. They drive what needs to be done, right? So if you want to enable applications, and if there is IoT applications, whether we're talking about, OR kind of application, or, traditional, or even connected car kind of applications, in many ways that is a little bit of an IoT too. You need, connectivity and edge compute with minimal latency, number one, but number two, security, because there are so many devices, you need to be able to discover these devices quickly, which is one of the classical challenges we are seeing in the enterprise. Discover these various different IoT devices there, and then having a security profile, having some sort of admission control policy and all that stuff. So those are all parts of what we're looking at. Security has been a core competency for Juniper. So as we go into edge compute and as we do more things like cloud delivered enterprise, we're looking at security and IoT aspects increasingly, as part of the holistic solution. But from a Juniper point of view, we're not focused on IoT as a specific vertical, but IoT is an essential part of our overall initiative to go drive edge compute as well as cloud delivered enterprise.
Fantastic. Now, you're quite familiar with the fabric, and we have worked together at Juniper in the fabric. I'd like to get your take on how you see how fabric operates and how fabric's value to Juniper, and also any comments that you have on the fabric.
Being connected to the startup ecosystem, one thing I realized is there is this category of serial entrepreneurs who have figured out the art, in many, almost like a science fashion, right? They know exactly what to do, when to do, what not. But that is actually a small, almost like a tip of the pyramid, right? There is a much more larger mass at the bottom of the pyramid who are willing entrepreneurs who sometimes struggle with some of the basic things like, how do I put a business plan together? How do I put a team of 5 or 10 people together to start a prototype? How do I get to the stage of going to a Series A? I get the basic seed funding, but how do I build it to a Series A thing? So many of these things are new to many smart people. They're very smart in what they need to do. They know exactly what their problem they need to solve, and they even can put together a good team too. But they struggle with all of these other things, which if you do the classical way, you end up giving a significant amount of ownership to the early stage to some of the VCs, but more importantly, you take a lot more time. And with no experience coming from, experienced help coming to help you, right? So for the new budding entrepreneur, this is actually almost like manna dropping from the heaven, because you're taking away all the complexities. You're taking away all the stuff which is tough for a new person to decipher and execute on, and allowing them to execute on the area where they're good at doing, which is like to build the strategy and build the product and get it out to market and talk to the customers.
Thank you. But actually, I do want to tell you is we have multiple repeat entrepreneurs also who are here, who, having gone through the complexity, seem to have the same issues. But
there is like about 90% of the community who are thriving to build a startup, who can build amazing startups, who are not getting the opportunity today because they don't have these basic capabilities.
Great. Given the rich background that you have, what would you like to give as parting advice to our audience?
I think.
What pitfalls do you think you would like to have them avoid?
I was going to tell them the good part, but now you start with the pitfalls. So let's just start with the pitfalls. Yeah. So one most important thing is focus. If it's very easy to get pulled in different directions, but you have to have a maniacal focus on what is your core competency, what is the problem you're trying to solve, what's the product market fit you're driving towards, and almost be really ruthless in saying no to things which don't align with that. If you don't have that focus, you're talking about a 5-people team, 10-people team, 20-people team, 50-people team, 100-people team. All of these are small teams. If you don't have that focus, you can get distracted in different ways, and you do like few things halfway. It's so much better to do one thing really well. Because it's really going to make a huge difference. I think that's the number one thing, pitfall, which entrepreneurs get into, because suddenly you see a new shiny toy here. This is something I can solve with my technique. Or there's another shiny toy. Let's go after that. Especially when you get into the late stages in terms of sales duplication. I think once you get the product market fit, making sure that you have a repeat motion where you enable a lot of people to sell quickly. Because it's not about the complexity of the sale, it's actually about the simplicity of the sale. You've got to make it as simple as possible for the feet on the street to go and sell, or if you're going through inside sales, cloud motion, how easy they can actually download something, whether it's through your freemium model or the demo model, download it in 2 to 5 minutes, they should be able to see the value. So focus on things like that. It may seem counterintuitive to you. It's not the complex thing that actually wins. It's actually the simple thing that wins. You have to simplify the complexity. The complexity is something for you to absorb in your internal product and internal within the company. But when you go to customers, when you go to partners, when you put it on the website for people to download, freemium or anything like that, it's got to be super simple to work. That's the one thing you need to focus on. So it's not going after 10 things, it's going after one thing and making it super simple, which is the most important thing, which is
That's a fantastic piece of advice. So if I were to say priority 1, 2, and 3 for entrepreneurs is simplify, simplify, and simplify.
Well said.
Manoj, thank you very much for participating in our Spotlight series. And I'd like to thank the audience for spending time with us. And please await more exciting episodes of our Spotlight series.